The most dangerous sound in the Amazon is not the roar of a jaguar. It is the voice of someone you love. A voice calling out to you from the darkness, begging for help. What kind of monster hunts not with claws and teeth, but with your most cherished memories? In Brazil, they call it the Curupira, and its methods are a form of psychological torture so sadistic it makes the Skinwalker look like a bedtime story. In the vast, unforgiving landscapes of the American Southwest, they whisper tales of the Skinwalker, a thing of stolen skins and violated forms, a monster that embodies the terror of the familiar becoming the malevolent. It is a potent, primal fear. But on the other side of the equator, in an ocean of green so vast it breathes for the entire planet, there exists something else, something older, something that does not need to steal a face, because it has learned to steal a voice. And in the Amazon, that is a far more sadistic weapon. Ricardo was not a hunter. He was a butcher who used the forest as his abattoir. To him, the Amazon was not a living entity to be respected. It was a vault to be plundered. He trespassed on protected lands, used illegal traps, and killed not for sustenance, but for the thrill of conquest and the weight of the coin it brought him. He sneered at the local legends, the supersticiones de indio that warned against disrespecting the jungle. To him, the only spirits in the forest were the ones in his flask, and the only danger was being caught by the authorities. He was deep in forbidden territory, tracking a rare jaguar whose pelt would fetch a fortune. The air, thick and humid, clung to him like a shroud. The jungle's usual symphony of life had been choked into an unnerving silence. Ricardo felt a flicker of annoyance, not fear. The silence meant the animals were hiding. Then he heard it. A sound that cut through the oppressive quiet, a sound so impossible, so out of place, that his brain struggled to process it. "Papai?" He froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. It was the voice of his little girl, Clara, clear as day. It sounded as if she were just a few meters away, just beyond a curtain of thick leaves. Impossible. She was hundreds of kilometers away, safe in their small town. He raised his rifle, scanning the trees, his mind racing. A rival hunter playing a trick? A lost child? "Papai, me ajuda, el toco medo." The voice was filled with a desperate, trembling fear that clawed at the deepest parts of his soul. Every paternal instinct screamed at him to run towards the sound. His rational mind, the cold, calculating mind of a poacher, was at war with his heart. He took a hesitant step forward, then another. "Clara?" he called out, his voice hoarse. As he moved, he saw them on the muddy ground. Footprints. Human-like, but disturbingly wrong. They were small, like a child's, but the tracks were inverted. The heels were where the toes should be, leading away from where the voice was coming from. Ricardo was a master tracker. He had seen every kind of animal track the jungle could offer. He had never seen this. A chill, colder than any jungle night, washed over him. He looked up from the impossible footprints and heard the voice again. Closer now, a soft, sobbing whisper from his right. "Socorro, papai." He was being played with. The realization hit him not with anger, but with a sudden, sickening wave of pure, primal fear. He was not the hunter here. He was the prey. And the thing that was hunting him didn't want his flesh. It wanted to break his mind. The hunter's instinct in Ricardo warred with a new, cold terror. His mind, honed by years of tracking and killing, refused to accept the impossible. He raised his rifle, finger trembling on the trigger, aiming at the empty space where the voice had been. There was nothing but the oppressive, suffocating green. The silence returned, thicker and heavier than before, pressing in on him. He was a man who commanded his environment through violence and skill, but both were now useless. The jungle, his hunting ground, had become a cage, and something was rattling the bars. He tried to rationalize. The footprints were a trick of the light, a deformity in the mud. The voice was a parrot, a strange jungle bird known for its mimicry. But he knew he was lying to himself. No bird could capture the terrified, pleading soul of his own daughter's voice. This was an intelligence at work, a malevolent, playful cruelty. The core of the Curupira's terror is not its physical threat, but its complete mastery of psychological warfare. It is a creature that understands the human mind intimately, and it knows that the deepest fears are not of claws and teeth, but of loss, of guilt, and of the voices we love turned against us. The backward feet are the first and most famous of its tools. They are not merely a method of confusion for a tracker. They are a statement of intent, a declaration that the normal laws of nature no longer apply. A hunter following the tracks thinks his prey is moving away, that he is safe. He relaxes his guard. But in reality, with every step he takes, he is walking directly towards the predator that is waiting for him. It is a trap that weaponizes a hunter's own skill, turning his expertise into a path to his own doom. Ricardo, ignoring the chilling paradox of the footprints, decided to act. He would not be the prey. He chose a direction away from the last sound he heard and began to move, his steps quiet, his rifle ready. He would turn the tables on whatever was stalking him. But the jungle had other plans. After 10 minutes of moving through what should have been unfamiliar territory, he saw the gnarled fig tree again. He had walked in a perfect circle. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the edges of his composure. He tried again, marking the tree with his knife, and set off in the opposite direction.
The jungle seemed to writhe around him. Vines, thick as a man's arm, seemed to shift and coil, blocking his path. Trees that were distant moments ago now stood directly in his way. The air grew heavy, and a disorienting mist began to seep up from the forest floor, swallowing the last of the twilight. Then a new voice. A woman's voice, a soft, seductive whisper that seemed to come right beside his ear. Ricardo, Amour. It was his wife, Maria. He spun around, rifle raised, his heart seizing in his chest.
There was nothing. Just the swirling gray mist. "Maria!" he choked out. The whisper came again from his other side. "Vem aqui, meu bem. Eu achei uma coisa pra você. Come here, my love. I found something for you." This was its true power. The Curupira does not just mimic sounds. It plucks memories and emotions directly from its victim's mind. It finds the voices that are tied to your deepest feelings: love, fear, guilt, longing, and it turns them into bait. It doesn't need to know who your daughter is. It only needs to know the sound of your love for her. It doesn't need to know your wife. It only needs to feel your desire for her. It is a psychic predator, a demon that hunts not your body, but your attachments. Ricardo began to run. He crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping at his face, the logic of the forest dissolving around him into a fever dream. Paths appeared and vanished. The moon, which should have been rising on his left, now seemed to hang directly in front of him, then behind. He was trapped in a labyrinth with no walls, a prison made of his own failing senses. And all the while, the voices came and went. The sobbing of his daughter, the seductive whisper of his wife, a baby crying in the distance. Each sound was a new hook, a new emotional torture, designed to break him down, piece by piece. The legends say the Curupira is the living embodiment of the forest, its sentient will. It is an amoral force, neither good nor evil in a human sense. When a tree is struck by lightning, the lightning is not evil. When a river floods and drowns a village, the water is not evil. And when the Curupira hunts a man like Ricardo, a man who has brought firearms, poison traps, and greed into its sacred domain, it is not an act of malice. It is an act of cleansing. It is the forest's immune system identifying a virus and working to eradicate it in the most efficient and often most cruel way possible. It is rarely seen even by its victims. It is small, often described as the size of a human child, but with a body that is unnaturally dense and strong. Its skin is like the bark of an old tree. Its teeth are often sharpened into points,
and its hair is a shock of vibrant, fiery red, like the flames of a forest fire. It moves through the jungle with a supernatural silence and speed, a ghost that is all too real. Exhausted, lost, and on the verge of madness, Ricardo stumbled into a small clearing and fell to his knees. He was covered in mud and scratches, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had been running for what felt like hours, yet the garned fig tree was still visible through the mist. He had never left. As he knelt there, defeated, a new voice echoed in the clearing, a weak, raspy voice, an old woman. "Filho, por que você me deixou?" My son, why did you leave me? It was the voice of his mother, a woman he had abandoned in poverty years ago, and who had died alone. This was a voice tied not to love, but to a deep, festering guilt he had buried for a decade.
A sob escaped Ricardo's lips. This was a cruelty beyond measure. The creature was now digging into the deepest, most rotten parts of his soul. He had come to the jungle to feel powerful, to dominate. Now he was a child again, lost in the dark, haunted by every sin he had ever committed. The hunter was completely and irrevocably broken. As the last ghostly syllable of his mother's voice faded into the mist, the cacophony returned. Not the familiar sounds of the jungle, but a twisted, distorted version. The chirping of insects became a high-pitched, metallic screeching. The distant call of a bird became a woman's mocking laughter. The very air around Ricardo seemed to vibrate with a malevolent energy. The time for games was over. The judgment had been passed, and now the sentence would be carried out. He looked up from the mud, his face stained with tears and dirt. And there, standing at the edge of the clearing, was the source of his torment. It was not a towering beast, not a roaring demon. It was a small figure, no taller than a child, almost lost in the shadows. Its body was a dense, gnarled mass of wood and muscle. Its skin the color and texture of an ancient tree's bark. A mane of brilliant, fiery red hair cascaded down its back, a stark, violent slash of color against the oppressive green and brown of the jungle. But it was the eyes that held him. They were not the mindless, predatory eyes of a jaguar. They were ancient, intelligent, and utterly devoid of emotion. They shone with a faint red light, like the embers of a dying fire. In those eyes, Ricardo saw no rage, no hatred. He saw something far more terrifying, a calm, detached certainty. It was the look of a craftsman studying a piece of wood before the first strike of the axe. Ricardo screamed, a sound of pure, defiant rage, and scrambled to raise his rifle. He fired. The roar of the gun shattered the air, a final, futile act of human violence against a world that had turned on him.
The bullet tore through the space where the creature had been, but it was already gone. In a blur of impossible speed, it had moved, reappearing at his side as if it had simply stepped through the space between moments. He had no time to scream again. Something incredibly hard and heavy struck his leg. The sound was a wet, sickening crack of bone. Pain, white-hot and absolute, exploded through his body. He collapsed, his rifle flying from his grasp. He looked down and saw his leg bent at an unnatural angle. The creature stood over him, holding a gnarled, club-like branch, its red eyes glowing in the gloom. It struck again, this time against his arm, shattering the bone with another precise, economical blow. The Curupira's punishment is not a swift death. Death is a release, an escape. The Curupira's justice is a lesson, and a lesson must be learned through suffering. It does not kill its victims, not at first. It maims them. It breaks their legs so they cannot run. It breaks their arms so they cannot fight or climb.
It leaves them crippled, helpless, and utterly at the mercy of the jungle they sought to plunder. Ricardo lay on the forest floor, whimpering, his body a broken mess. The small, demonic figure looked down at him for a long moment, its expression unchanging. Then, as silently as it appeared, it turned and vanished back into the mist. But the torture was not over. In fact, it had just begun. As Ricardo lay there, bleeding and broken, the voices returned. The pleading of his daughter, the whispers of his wife, the accusatory cry of his mother. They swirled around him, a ghostly chorus of his own personal hell. The jungle itself seemed to mock him. The path he had followed moments before was gone, replaced by a wall of impenetrable thorns. The sound of a rushing river would spring up to his left, promising water, only to vanish when he tried to crawl towards it. Illusions, sounds, and memories became his new prison. He was left alive, but his life was no longer his own. He was a broken toy in the hands of a cruel, ancient child. He would die here, not from the creature's blow, but from starvation, from infection, from the predators that would be drawn to the smell of his blood. He would die slowly, lost and insane, haunted by the voices of those he loved until his last agonizing breath. And his body would never be found. It would be consumed by the jungle, his bones scattered, his rifle rusting into the soil, every trace of his arrogant trespass erased. He had come to take a life from the forest, and in the end, the forest had simply taken him back, absorbing him completely, leaving nothing behind but a new, dark story to be whispered by those who knew better. This is the true nature of the Curupira's role as a guardian. The concept of a guardian in human mythology is typically one of benevolent protection, a shepherd guarding its flock.
The Curupira is not a shepherd. It is a wolf. It guards its territory by eliminating threats with extreme prejudice. To the indigenous peoples who have lived in harmony with the forest for millennia, the Curupira is a respected, if feared, ally. It punishes those who hunt out of season, who kill pregnant animals, or who take more than they need. It is a force of balance. But to the outsider, the poacher, the logger, the one who sees the jungle not as a home, but as a resource to be exploited, the Curupira is an implacable, sadistic demon. Its methods are a horrifying reflection of the trespasser's own sins. It uses a hunter's own tracking skills against him with its backward feet. It uses a logger's loud, invasive noises against him by creating a disorienting wall of sound. And for the man who brings the ultimate tool of human arrogance, the firearm, it uses a weapon far more powerful: his own mind. Its powers are a terrifying arsenal of psychological warfare. It is a master of ventriloquism and mimicry, capable of perfectly replicating any sound, from the cry of an animal to the most intimate whisper of a human voice.
It is a master of illusion, capable of altering its victim's perception of the forest, moving paths, creating false landmarks, and trapping them in inescapable loops. And it possesses a form of limited telepathy, an ability to sense the deep-seated emotional connections and guilts of its victims, choosing the perfect voice to use as a lure or an instrument of mental torture. It doesn't just want to kill the intruder, it wants to make an example of them, to turn their death into a harrowing cautionary tale that will echo through the generations. A story that serves as a far more effective deterrent than any fence or posted sign. The fear of the Curupira is, at its core, the fear of the natural world turning its vast, ancient intelligence against us. It is the terror of being lost, not just in a physical space, but in a landscape that is actively hostile and sentient. The Skinwalker of American lore is a horrifying perversion of the natural order, a human who twists nature's laws to become a monster. The Curupira, however, is the natural order. It is nature's law given monstrous form. It is not an aberration, it is the consequence. This ancient entity forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. We see ourselves as the masters of the world, the apex predators at the top of the food chain. We enter the wilderness armed with our technology, our rifles, our GPS, our maps, confident in our ability to dominate it. The legend of the Curupira is a chilling rebuke to that arrogance. It tells us that in the places where the world is still truly wild, we are not the masters. We are guests. And if we violate the hospitality of our host, we will be reminded of our place in the most brutal way imaginable. The Curupira doesn't fight us on our terms. It does not engage in a battle of strength or firepower. It pulls us down to its level, a world of instinct, of fear, and of sensory deception.
It strips away our tools and our confidence, leaving us as nothing more than terrified, lost animals. Its backward feet are a profound symbol. They represent a logic that is inverted to our own, a way of being that we cannot comprehend. To be hunted by the Curupira is to be outsmarted by a form of intelligence that is older, deeper, and far more patient than our own. It is the horror of discovering that you are and never were at the top of the food chain. And so the legend endures, a whisper in the heart of the Amazon. It is a story that has been told for countless generations, a warning passed down from father to son. But unlike many myths that have been softened by time, the tale of the Curupira seems to grow darker, more relevant with each passing year. In an age of rampant deforestation, of burning rainforests and ecological collapse, the idea of the jungle having a vengeful, sadistic guardian has never been more potent. The Curupira is the ultimate eco-terrorist, a monster for the Anthropocene. It is a reminder that the world's last wild places are not empty spaces waiting to be conquered.
They are ancient kingdoms, governed by their own laws and protected by their own guardians. And when we trespass, when we take more than we should, when we hunt out of greed instead of need, we risk awakening something that has been sleeping for a very, very long time. Something that knows the sound of our deepest loves and our most secret guilts. Something with fiery red hair and feet that point the wrong way. Something that sees our arrogance not as a strength, but as a fatal, exploitable weakness. The Curupira is a chilling reminder that some of the oldest horrors are not born from human evil, but from the ancient, amoral power of nature itself. It is the jungle's answer to our arrogance. But the world is full of dark legends, each one a reflection of a unique fear. Of all the monsters we've explored, and all the ones still lurking in the shadows, which one haunts you the most? Let us know in the comments. And to ensure you don't miss our next descent into the abyss, subscribe and activate the notifications.